very much for those remarks. I mean, when you see the data on the racial disparity, especially displayed in such accessible terms as these bar graphs, it makes you sick to your stomach to think that America, founded on the principles on which we've been founded, that can be the result. One of my dear friends on the board of directors of NORML, Jeffrey Steinborn, a fantastic attorney from the city of Seattle, who's unfortunately here today, said something to me a few years ago, and I've been chewing on it ever since, that in his view, drug prohibition is the worst social disaster, self-inflicted social disaster America's had since slavery. And that seems a little harsh, but when you look at the results, the more I look at the results, I feel a continuity of that horrible piece of our past is still with us. Anyway, I'd like to introduce the last speaker of this panel. He probably needs no more introduction other than his name, but Nathan Nadelmann is the executive. I'm addled after.
Easy for you.
Yes. Anyway, he's the executive director of the Drug Policy Alliance and a long-term researcher in this topic.
Thank you, George. Sort of. You know, my name's actually Ethan Nadelmann, and I've been told by a much-cited Harry Levine that I actually have to come to peace with my inner Nathan, which I work on every day. So I thought the best thing I could talk about here is how do we not get to 30 million arrests? That seems to be the basic question, right? You know, got to 10, we sped up towards 20. We definitely don't want to be speeding up towards 30 million. And I also want to put this as best I can in the broader context of broader drug law reform. You know, that the marijuana issue and the issue of marijuana decriminalization and ending marijuana prohibition ultimately stands on its own, but it also ultimately is part of the broader way we deal with drugs in our society. And it's part of the ways we deal with the broader levels of ignorance and fear and prejudice and profit that also help to drive the drug war. I know many of you, when I've asked this question before, I'll say, how many of you are just interested in marijuana, and how many of you are actually interested in ending the broader drug war that's out there? How many of you are interested in ending the broader drug war that's out there? Okay, that's most of you right there. So we see marijuana is the one where the case for making it legal is most obvious. It's the one where it's most politically pragmatic. It's the one where we're closest to success. I hope that as much as possible, if we ever do succeed in that objective, and I think we will, I hope that you won't all say, okay, I'm done with it, let's go, and forget about everything else there. Because we don't know whether the answer for the other drugs is ultimately to make it all legal, tax control, regulate, maybe, maybe not. But we do know that the evidence that Ryan and Craig put up there about the massive over-incarceration in America, about the massive level of arrest, about the racial prejudice and the racial disparities that drive this are also not right. And they are not just. I can tell you there are people fighting that in other parts of the drug war who worry. They go, oh, it's marijuana guys, they just care about their own thing, their own right to get high. You know, well, it's part of it, yes, our right to get high, our right to put in our bodies what we see fit without being punished. But we cannot forget about the other people out there who are also being discriminated against and punished and beat down as well, oftentimes irrespective of any harm that they're doing to anybody else in our society. So there needs to be a moral commitment in this group, in NORML, in the marijuana reform community, that even when we achieve our victory with respect to marijuana, we don't forget about the others. Now, let me throw out some questions that I've been wondering about, and also just a few experiences recently that have got me thinking about various things. And more recently, I've been involved much more on the international front, been traveling outside the U.S. quite a bit in the last 6 months. And I'm also oftentimes surprised at how uninformed people are outside the U.S. about what's going on in the U.S. I'll tell you, I was down at a meeting chaired by a couple of Latin American presidents, former Presidents Cardoso of Brazil and Gaviria of Colombia, in Bogota last month, and they are co-chairing a commission with former President Zedillo of Mexico that's really looking at how you fundamentally change the paradigm of global drug control. There's a lot of sentiment in this commission that maybe legalization is the best answer, but also a realization that to talk about it and advocate it outright would just sort of leave it to be dismissed. So therefore, thinking creatively about how you deal with the problems both of drugs and of drug prohibition in Mexico, Colombia, the Caribbean, Afghanistan, and everywhere else. And when it was my turn to speak, I was sort of talking about this paradigm shift, but one of the points I made to them was that when you look at sort of innovative drug policies, one of the most innovative and progressive things that's happened anywhere in the world in the last 10 years has been medical marijuana in the United States. It is. That what happened in the Netherlands in 1976 with the opening up of the coffee shop system, not by law, right, but the bubbling up, was reproduced in 1996 in California with Prop 215. No law setting up the dispensaries, but at the same time, a change of law in the broader context that allowed those things to bubble up to the point where today 150 or 200,000 people in California have a medical marijuana ID card, where even as marijuana arrests in California have increased, nonetheless, the safe havens from arrest, from prosecution, from the criminal justice system are expanding. When you look at other states with a more tightly drafted medical marijuana initiatives, nonetheless, in some of those states, hundreds, if not thousands, in a couple cases, tens of thousands. That's something new. That's a bubbling up. And to some extent, well, Europe right now is a bit bogged down. You know, the Dutch got so close to making marijuana legal. They more or less legalized the personal use and the retail side, but they couldn't quite get to the wholesale piece a few years ago because of pressure from others in the European Union. Then the Swiss a few years ago almost made it legal as well. It got through the conservative Swiss Senate, but did not make it through the Swiss Assembly. Both places now have more conservative governments. So the Europeans, who have been the leaders on cannabis reform, are a bit stuck right now. I think and I hope they're just sort of catching their breath so that they come back strong in the years to come. But to some extent, some of the momentum is really shifting towards North America. You know, what's happening in British Columbia right now, and in Quebec, notwithstanding the fairly reactionary Canadian government, the Harper government, is very promising. And what's happening around medical marijuana right now is also extremely promising, and for which many of you are directly and personally responsible. So stand here and take credit for being at the forefront of marijuana reform in the world